we are speaking about topics, about issues that should have been resolved long ago. We are holding this debate 3,709 days exactly after the Brussels Agreement on Normalization of Relations was signed. And more than 10 years ago, we agreed upon certain principles of conduct between parties. In fact, for a while, we were actually, I believe, going in the really right direction, and we had institutions on the ground that, started being more participatory and being more inclusive of the members of the Serbian community. We had, for the first time ever, Serbs represented in local municipalities, in the police, in the court and judicial system, and so forth. And then all of a sudden, let's say about a year and a half ago, which coincided with the tragedy that unfolded with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the authorities in Pristina started to resort to unilateral measures on the ground aimed at actually unilaterally changing the situation to their advantage outside of the scope of the dialogue process. At the same time, they also publicly renounced the earlier agreements. That was actually part of the platform on which Mr. Kurti and his government ran on. When they were advocating and for their voters to support them, and when they were gathering support, they were public and vocal about renouncing the main principles of the Brussels Agreement, including the formation of the community of Serb majority municipalities. And one must admit that in that respect, they were pretty consistent, because when they did come into power, they first stated that the dialogue was not their priority, that the community of Serb majority municipalities is some kind of a scarecrow which will undermine the otherwise unrecognized declaration of independence by not just Serbia, but a huge number of countries, in fact, the majority of UN members. Now, unfortunately, the authorities in Pristina resorted to what became dangerous escalations by starting to send special police units into the north of Kosovo. For those who do not follow this topic on a daily basis, I want to emphasize the fact that Article 9 of the Brussels Agreement clearly stipulates that the policing in the north of Kosovo will be done exclusively by a police structure which is proportional to the ethnic structure in the north of Kosovo. And by sending those special police units comprising mostly of former KLM members and certainly an exclusively monoethnic police structure, it created an environment which was conducive for further problems on the ground. Then what my colleague, Mr. Dugoli here mentioned, issues with license plates, again, unilateral measures, decision to, outside of the scope of the dialogue, ban the usage of Serbian license plates, stop and cease issuing status-neutral KS license plates, etc., etc. And now we came really into a situation which is, for the Serbs on the ground, intolerable. It is unbearable. The authorities in Pristina have actually blocked and banned even goods to pass the administrative line. They have banned now trucks carrying Serbian goods to supply stores and even hospitals. Like the hospital in North Mitrovica, which is being supplied by oxygen from central Serbia. Even such services have been halted by the authorities. The aim of the authorities in Pristina at this time, with this campaign of arrests, intimidation, and also replacing mayors that would be representative of the local community with people who do not enjoy a support greater of 1 to 3%. The aim seems to be to try and abuse the support that Kosovo has enjoyed for a long period of time in part of the international community, in order to push that part of the international community that has long supported Kosovo into some kind of a standoff with Serbia. That is a gross miscalculation. This is nothing further from what actually can happen. Serbia is today a country that is not just open for business, which is clear from the fact that it was able to attract more foreign direct investments than many of the countries in the region. But it is also a country that is clearly determined to integrate fully into the Euro-Atlantic community. And we have already, our economy is already integrated to the degree that the unemployment rate reduction that we have accomplished over the past 10 years or so, and the infrastructure development and many other things developed very much on this relationship. Today, we are facing with the fact that the EU High Representative is calling on the authorities in Pristina to cease unilaterally doing arrests which are and detentions which are not based in judicial decisions. So to stop extrajudicial arrests. And this is a very clear sign that something is wrong there. The Secretary of State, Mr. Antony Blinken, has publicly and unequivocally condemned the authorities in Pristina for their unilateral actions. I hate to say it, but what is happening in Kosovo now is actually a Groundhog Day in the truest sense of the word, because what we are seeing now, we have already seen in Kosovo in the early 1990s, just with the roles reversed. So unfortunately, 3 decades ago, what is happening now to the Serbs in Kosovo used to happen, unfortunately, to the Albanians. 3 decades later, one would hope that things would go in an entirely different direction. I just want to say that although we are in a much weaker position, although it's popular to say that Serbia is stronger here, which I don't believe is the case, because most of the time it is not Belgrade versus Pristina, it is what remains of the Serbian community in Kosovo against a very strong and cohesive government in Pristina. And on the other side, on the international scene, it is also not Belgrade versus Pristina, but the majority of EU countries plus US support Kosovo independence, and Serbia opposes. So what I want to say is that we are firmly committed to a peaceful and democratic way forward. And I will wrap up with this. I just want to say that what we believe is needed on the ground as a way forward is a return to status quo ante, which means the withdrawal of special police presence in violation of Article 9 of the Brussels Agreement, and their replacement with a representative police force, but in the meantime, replacement by KFOR and ULEX, who need to ensure, this is very significant, holding of free and fair democratic elections, in which people of the north of Kosovo will be able to choose their representatives freely. Then we need to have the release of all political prisoners, because we have dozens of people who are in extrajudicial imprisonment in Kosovo. And also, I think the rhetoric, the political rhetoric from the government in Pristina needs to be toned down, because the prime minister in Pristina, Mr. Albin Kurti, he labeled all of the peaceful protesters as some kind of a fascist militia. He said that half of them should be arrested and half of them should be forced to leave Kosovo. Well, Mr. Escobar, the US Special Envoy, clearly stated that according to KFOR data, more than 97% of protesters did not engage in any kind of violence. So we need to agree on how to resolve this question. And finally, the international community, in order for things to go back into normal channels of dialogue, needs to adopt a firm policy of zero tolerance for unilateral moves on the ground. Then and only then can we hope for stability to return to the streets of north of Kosovo. When it comes to the walkout of Kosovo Serb representatives from the institutions in the north, well, that happened not during any previous government, but during this government of Kosovo, and for a very specific reason. Namely, they walked out of the institutions after such an amount of extrajudicial arrests and such an intensity of illegal presence of special units, which I believe people who follow various other conflict zones can imagine in what ways can contribute to creating instability in an otherwise also volatile area. So instead of getting the community of Serb majority municipalities, which the Serbs were supposed to get in return for being integrated into Kosovo institutions, they got former KLA members, armed gunmen, under their windows. And of course, they did not agree, did not accept to participate in such a rigged system against them. And let me just illustrate with another example in what ways the system is being rigged against the Serbian community in Kosovo. My colleague mentioned, the postponement of elections and, supposedly the authorities not being able to further postpone elections until a more conducive environment is being created. Well, we see on the example of the Dečani monastery verdict that the authorities in Pristina do not care what the constitutional court says, do not care what even their constitution says, and only apply it as a principle of, buffet table, pick and choose. They pick and choose what they like. They don't apply what they do not like. And also, it was mentioned, I think maybe I failed at least to answer the question that your viewer asked so far, so I will try to do it now very quickly. Regarding the situation, regarding the so-called presence of criminal groups in the north, I want to emphasize that according to Kosovo Police Directorate, for 3 years in a row, Kosovo police region in the north was the most effective police region while the Serbs were participating. And that says a lot. When it comes to Serbia's position on the status question, that is not on the table now. We cannot discuss anything regarding the status of Kosovo while we have political prisoners, while we have armed gunmen on the streets of Kosovo, and while we have a government which is clearly stating that it does not want to fulfill the agreement on the association of the Serbian majority municipalities. A government that is acting against the advice of the Secretary of State's of the United States against the advice of the EUHR regarding the elections, a government that is acting against everyone's advice because the whole international community, that's maybe the unique topic in the world at the moment, the whole international community is asking the authorities in Kosovo to withdraw their special forces from the north. So we are very much interested in the resumption of the dialogue, but gentlemen, first implement your international obligations, release the political prisoners, stop the campaign of unilaterally trying to alter the situation on the ground. Things won't function like that. I want to say basically that Serbia is focused on a return to status quo ante. Sometimes you need to take a step back in order to make 2 steps forward. When I say status quo ante, I really mean what is basically contained in the calls from the European Union, the US, and other members of the international community on Pristina to withdraw its special forces, remove the so-called mayors, and start going back to the political process. If we accomplish this, then we won't have to worry about, potential implications of, undermined security in the north, and what would Serbia do, and what would, those special units that don't belong there do, etc., etc., etc. I mean, all you need to know about the state of democracy at the moment in the north of Kosovo is the fact that there are mayors in place, some of whom gained less than 10 votes. Less than 0.1% of the population supported some of these people. And that's really about everything you need to know about the current state of democracy in the north of Kosovo. We want to see a totally different picture. According to OSCE reports, there are more than 80,000 unresolved property cases of homes and apartments seized or illegally occupied by illegal tenants that belong to Kosovo Serbs and that have not been adjudicated. And the reason they have not been adjudicated is the fact that the authorities in Pristina have not formed what was envisaged as a joint agency for verifying and comparing the property, to which both sides would delegate an equal number of representatives. Instead, they created a monoethnic agency, which, of course, was boycotted by the Serbs, and hence, of course, the cadastral records are still unavailable to the authorities in Pristina because we don't know what they would do with them. But this is just telling about the fact that we need to work towards greater confidence building, that we need to return the trust in the dialogue process. And the only way to do it is to actually implement what was agreed. Not to implement what was discussed in Ohrid, but to implement what was signed and ratified by a 2/3 majority in parliament in Kosovo, which makes it obligatory and mandatory for every government in Pristina. And by the way, when we speak about the community of Serb majority municipalities, it is definitely above, I mean, the obligation, the commitment to form the community of Serb majority municipalities is above, in terms of the hierarchy of law, above any existing and valid positive law. In significant things have been accomplished. First of all, there isn't a war, and there hasn't been a war for a number of years. And more importantly, maybe even, is we have started to learn how to manage the disagreement, the clear disagreement that we have on the status and the questions of territory. And I believe that in the future, regardless of what happens in the short to mid run, we will be able to accomplish an environment in which there will be all four European freedoms, the freedom of movement of goods, people, capital, and services applied. And I hope in the future that we will even go beyond that and forge some kind of a stronger relationship between Serbs and Albanians in the Balkans in general.